Shirley Leung.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Stein, despite the Patrick administration's high-profile efforts to cap healthcare premiums for small businesses, many small businesses employers still face significant increases, and that's preventing them from expanding or hiring in some cases. As governor, what would you do? Would you continue to cap rates? Do you think there's a role for government in terms of controlling healthcare costs?
I think there's an even better way, and we're actually doing it right now, but in a small area of the healthcare sector. And we can expand that and not have to implement government controls, but this is a system that works. Caps have been tried before, and they're very cumbersome and they don't actually work. There are many factors generating cost inflation, and it's really true that this is a devastating problem and probably a bigger one than any other that prevents our small businesses from flourishing. So what I want to do and what I will pursue as governor is a so-called single-payer healthcare system, which is like Medicare. So it essentially entails expanding Medicare. And improving some of the holes that have been created in Medicare recently. But what happens when you move to that single-payer system is that you move from an overhead of about 15% down to an overhead of about 3%. That is your administrative cost. Just goes down, down, down. And it happens overnight. So instead of having to deal with this cost crisis in healthcare by cutting care, which is what all my opponents are talking about, they're talking about other systems that restrict your choice, that limit your providers, and that take holes out of your healthcare and increase your premiums. It's all about cost shifting. How about instead we just take out the wasteful, massive health insurance bureaucracy, which doesn't add to your care. It only adds to the complexity and the cost. And we know how to do this. We're doing it here in the US of A through Medicare, which is tried and true, and it works. So I will work to expand Medicare in Massachusetts so we can take what amounts to, it may be hundreds of millions, it could be as much as $1 billion each year. Healthcare is 50% of our state budget now. That's 1 out of every 2 tax dollars that you're paying are being spent in this healthcare system, which is just not doing the job, and it's gobbling up all the other areas of the budget. We can do it.
Let's move on to Kurt Nickish from WBUR.
Hi, Dr. Stein. I want to ask you about green-collar jobs. I know that, everybody knows what white-collar jobs are. Everybody knows what blue-collar jobs are. And you talked a little bit about some of the changes you'd like to see down the road. But one of the difficulties in setting up training programs is nobody really knows what this industry is going to look like, exactly what businesses are going to be around, what businesses are going to need. How will you set up a green-collar jobs training program that's actually going to fit the needs of the future?
Great point. And I think this really is this is the very exciting way to fast forward into the future in a way that saves us money, makes us healthier, reduces energy expenditures, and so on. And there are, I think we're going to learn as we go along here. But there are some examples that are up and running right now which are just going like gangbusters, and they're working really well. So, for example, there's a small business out in Holyoke called Energia, where they actually work with troubled youth, with young people who are usually high school dropouts, and they train them in essentially solar hot water retrofits for homes. And it's a couple months worth of training, and then they become essentially workers out there in the workforce. And what they do is provide this service to homes, businesses, government buildings, and reduce their energy costs. So it's a winner for the consumer. It's a winner for these students who had lost their way. They needed a break. They needed a job. They got the training, and it's up and running. I would love to see that kind of training made more widely available to all kinds of students. In fact, they then went on and completed their high school diplomas because they had found a way to plug in again.
Let's move on to a few lightning round questions. Again, we'll start with George.
You're a doctor, but we're curious, what was your very first job?
teaching guitar.
Do you still play?
When I get a chance.
Shirley.
There are more than, I think, 200,000 or 300,000 people in Massachusetts who are unemployed. What advice would you give them in terms of looking for a job?
Look hard and keep looking and don't stop and get your resume out everywhere you can. And I think work with organizations like SkillWorks that's talking about exactly the right stuff so that we can provide more jobs, more job training, and get people who have a lot to offer plugged back in. So I'd say hang in there.
Kurt.
I'm wondering if you ever had have you had a staff to hire? I mean, let me start off again. As governor of Massachusetts, you're essentially CEO of a huge corporation. Isn't as profit driven, but does have shareholders, of course. What sort of staff have you had? What sort of personnel decisions have you made? What's your philosophy?
I've done a lot of work with government. I have been, in government as a town meeting member, but I've been more active in the nonprofit sector where I have worked in very broad coalitions. My philosophy is that we need to engage people. We need to have open doors and shine the light on the business of our government, which belongs to people. So I will be a very inclusive governor. I plan to make the coroner office communications central. I think people tend to be very discouraged now about the role of government and cynical about who it is serving. Because I don't take money from lobbyists or from anybody who hires a lobbyist, I sort of come into this able to really serve ordinary people, and I'm going to raise the curtain on state government. We don't have an open meeting law. We don't have a public records law. It's hard for people to know about what's happening until it's already happened. I'm going to change that so that ordinary people know what's coming up. They can weigh in with their legislators and be participants in our democracy so we can get the jobs and the health care and the strong schools and the right priorities on Beacon Hill to get us there.
Right. Dr. Stein, thank you very much. Now we come to the point where we give you a 1-minute closing statement, and again, we have a helpful timekeeper.
Great. All right, thank you. So I'll just briefly say thank you again for the very important work that all of you are doing by being here and by being engaged in this election. I think we have a very clear choice this election. We have 3 candidates who have all been very much a part of the political machines on Beacon Hill, and then I myself am coming in as a medical doctor and as someone who has worked with broad expanses of the nonprofit sector, in particular, trying to advance our health care, trying to improve our schools, and trying to get a tax system that is more fair to consumers so that we don't see the current referendum, which would really be quite devastating to our services. I think we have a historic opportunity to really take Massachusetts on a different path, to put people back to work with secure green jobs, to get health care for everyone, and to make strong public schools. And I ask you to consider making change, the change we need, by actually voting for change, and to go into the voting booth and think about where we are and whether you want more of the same or whether you really want a change in direction.
Right. Dr. Jill Stein, thank you. Our next testimonial will be from Michael Tomasi. He's owner and president of Accurounds, a manufacturing company headquartered in Avon, Massachusetts. It's benefited from several workforce training fund grants, been able to expand its staff because of these grants, and was the subject of an excellent story on NECN earlier this year.
Thank you, Peter. Candidates and esteemed panelists, I'm pleased to represent the Massachusetts employers today at this very important forum. I'm a second-generation family business owner that started business in 1958 in Massachusetts. We have two companies, AccuRounds in Avon and Boston Centerless in Woburn. We manufacture mechanical components as well as precision ground bar that are used in numerous applications in the medical, defense,